coastline of the United States, along the Atlantic seaboard, and along our Gulf of Mexico coast. They're the primary interface between the oceanic environment and the mainland. In places where the barrier islands are relatively close to shore, they form a formidable barrier protecting the mainland from surge to some degree, and certainly from waves.
The seagrasses on the bay side of the island are the glue, so to speak, that keep the island from moving at probably a faster rate than they would if they weren't there at all. The island naturally rolls over on itself over time, and you lose the Gulf side. So when you have a storm come through, all the sediments go to the back bay area or on top of the island. And the vegetation on the island is very important. The dune plants, the swale plants, all of the mangroves are extremely important in the integrity of maintaining and holding the island together.
The islands in Louisiana, the barrier islands there, are intimately associated with delta lobes. The Mississippi comes down a given course, builds a bird-foot delta that extends out into the Gulf of Mexico, and then, as we know historically, the river switches course on its own with no human influence. When that happens, it essentially starves that bird-foot delta that formed. And this occurred about 2,000 years ago where the Chandeleurs sit today. The sediment that had been dumped by the Mississippi over hundreds and thousands of years compacted and sunk, and the whole surface of the land was sinking below the water surface. Through time, that beach that had formed actually just stood by itself. All the marshes around it disappeared, sunk below sea level, and that's what created the barrier islands. The end stage of this process is when the barrier islands actually disappear. The U.S. Geological Survey has had a long interest in the barrier islands of Louisiana. One of the primary reasons is that they are eroding so rapidly. The track of Katrina passed 23 kilometers to the west of the islands, and the track of the storm pretty much parallel in north-south trend of the islands. What happened there was extraordinary. Virtually all of the sand that we could visually see from the air was removed from the islands. The major question is, where did it go? Flying over those islands 2 days after Katrina's landfall, it was a different world. And the island had lost about 85% of its surface area. And over the 2 years following Katrina, over 50% of the length of the islands continued to erode rapidly. That marshy platform on which the sand naturally sits to form the island is actually disappearing rapidly. And there is some realistic concern that if those islands get hit again here in the next year or two, let's say, whatever sand has come back will be stripped off again, and there'll be further catastrophic erosion. If this keeps up, then those islands could easily go away within a decade or so.
The differences from the northern part of the island and the southern part of the island have a lot to do with longshore currents on the Gulf side. The southern tip erodes much faster than the north. In the north, you usually have a spit building out from where the Hughes Point is. The southern portion is much more broken up, and you have Grand Gosier and Breton Island to the farther south, and some other islands that used to appear in between, which were gone after Hurricane George.
It comes down to choices. One way to bring them back has already been done to some degree in central Louisiana, where you mine sand elsewhere and put it back on the beach and rebuild the islands. That's one possibility that is being considered, but no decisions have been made. But these are difficult choices in that when you rebuild an island like that, it is not a solution to their long-term erosion. It's only a stopgap method of slowing it down. It's a maintenance of a deteriorating situation that will have to come back and be revisited periodically. To do anything like that would have to be carefully looked at in terms of its economics, in terms of the value of the island from an ecological point of view, from a protection point of view, from maintaining an estuarine environment point of view.
it's a resource we don't want to lose, even though the natural evolution of a barrier island is that it eventually goes away. We need to preserve it because of protection for our main coastline. And since we've already harnessed the Mississippi River, then the natural thing to do would be to repair the island itself and focus attention to the resources that are there.